we can go ahead. The YouTube stream is ready. Your whole committee is here. I have Mr. Merlino here in the boardroom. The rest of the committee is on Zoom. And you need to unmute.
Ron, you're on mute.
Still on mute.
You're on mute, Ron.
Let's try this one more time.
That's better.
Thank you, everyone. Entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the previous meeting. Andrea on the motion, Brad on the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you, everyone. Kevin, do you want to discuss some of these lease arrangements first, or do you want to move right into the action agenda first?
No, we'll go right into the action agenda items right away.
Okay, we'll go right into the action items. Page 2, request to amend the existing grant with New York State Department of Transportation. Chair will entertain a motion to bring this to the floor for consideration. Andrea, Mr. Bruno on the second. Discussion. Kevin, what do we have here?
So the next three items all kind of go in order with one another. Page 2, 9, and 10. The first one is to the amend the existing grant with DOT. This is for the South Johnsburg culvert over Mill Creek. This is for right-of-way incidental work. Just to determine right-of-way out there, it's a fee to our consultant. I believe it was about $5,800. And you'll see that the increase to capital project as well as the amend contract with the Clark Patterson Lee are all for that $5,831.
All right, very good. Ms. Hogan, Mr. Bruno, are you prepared to amend your motion to include all three items? Ms. Hogan, on the amended motion, Mr. Bruno as well. Thank you. Any further discussion on items for pages 2, 9, and 10? Then are we ready for the question? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? A motion carried. Thank you. Item 18, request to authorize the chairman to sign just compensation rationale for right-of-way acquisition for 13th Lake Road Culvert Project. Chair will entertain a motion to bring this to the floor for consideration. Mr. McGowan? Mr. Bruno? Kevin, what do we have here?
So real quick, we had our consultant, RKI Height, go out and do appraisals for all the property around the 13th Lake culvert replacement. There's only one property that we need to get some right away from. You'll see that the total cost is approximately $200. So this is to require the authorization for the chairman to sign that amount.
Any questions for Kevin Hajos? There being none, are we ready for the question? All those in favor of item 18 signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Item 18 is carried. Item 21, request transfers for salaries. Chair will entertain a motion to bring this to the floor for consideration. Ms. McGowan, Ms. Hogan on the second. Kevin, what do we have here?
This is just a transfer of salaries for my individual who works in a shop who moves containers around. He had a couple of requests, or we had a couple of requests from towns to move containers around. I think it's a transfer of $94 because there is no overtime in there. And it's for, he just didn't get back to the shop before 3 o'clock.
Any questions for the commissioner? Ms. Hogan.
I just want to say we appreciate this help during this time. I don't know if everybody's town has experienced this, but we've had an unprecedented amount of waste generated as people are home and apparently cleaning out. So that's very helpful. Thank you.
All right, then. Are we ready for the question? All those in favor of item 21 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. Now we can move into referral or pending items. Kevin, what do you want to deal with first?
So we'll go to the removal or referrals. This is a referral that came from OCTAX Coordination Committee meeting. As you all are aware, we approved during Park O&M to reduce the fees on the Charles R. Wood Park for any events that happened this year. I think we reduced them by half. There was some discussion about reducing the fees to the parking lot. They have not been approved yet. I know it's been talked about in committees, but this is the committee that approves that. So I don't have a resolution yet. We can talk about it, and then we can probably go to resolution, but there's also a discussion to reduce the fees for the parking lot as well. The only thing that I want everybody to keep in mind with this is that there's a revenue that is generated from the fees from the park as well as from the parking lot. The normal fees from the meter are just, normal revenue, but most of the revenue that comes in when there's an event at Charles R. Wood Park and they use the parking lot covers the cost of the mowing, any work that needs to be done on the south parcel. And right now, I looking at the numbers, we are probably at a break even, or it could be in the red, or we're just not going to do some of that contract work for the park or the south parcel this year.
All right. Any questions for the commissioner or the chair will entertain a motion if there's anyone's interested in making a motion.
Question.
Mr. Leggett. Supervisor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Westbrook parking lot, that is actually along the road. Is that correct?
That's a separate parcel, yes. Westbrook Road was separated probably 6-7 years ago now, so that it's 2 lanes on one side of the brook. On the other side of the brook, we converted that to a parcel for this parking lot.
Okay. And when you say the south lot?
The south parcel is the parcel on the opposite side of Westbrook that is the environmental park with the stormwater ponds, the walking trails. We, along with the 3 E's and the village of Lake George and the town of Lake George, maintain that park.
Okay. Yeah. And so, Mr. Chairman, if I may ask another question, then is there the request to reduce the rates was for what purpose?
Where were you?
Mr. Hayes, the question was, the recommendation was from the OCTAX committee to reduce the rate for what purpose?
I'm part of that OCTAX committee, but I believe Gene is probably in the boardroom, and Gene probably can answer that question better than anybody.
I'm sorry, you broke up there, my reception. Can you repeat yourself?
Yes, this came to me from OCTAX. I just know that since there was a request to reduce the fees for the park, some of the events that are coming, such as I believe Mary-Kate, and I will let Gene talk to that, they also were looking for a request to reduce the parking lot because they use the parking lot during the event as well. But and Mary can jump on this as well. You can't just reduce for one, you would have to reduce for all.
I think that's the important point right there. Gene, do you want to add anything here?
Yeah, a month ago, we decided to reduce half of the Charlie Wood Park for any events for the rest of this year, and it was approved. Also, now we're getting the request for the Westbrook parking area. Americade uses that, and I think it's about $10,000 that they pay us for it, and they were looking for half. If we give it to them, it also, like Mary says, we have to give it to everybody else that would request it. But over the years, we've never used anything else in that parking except for Americade. So we got to be careful with that part of it. I know the Wine and Beer Festival is talking about using it and put all their vendors out there. That's something I think we should discuss before we say okay.
Just for context, Ryan, perhaps you could comment on your crystal ball as to when events are even going to be permitted under the pause order.
I wouldn't be able to speculate on that because the essential business restrictions That's the ESD page that it's updated every couple of days. Those restrictions are all still in place when it comes to gatherings, unnecessary gatherings.
Does everyone understand that? That even though you're in step one, the pause order of gatherings of any group for any size, for any purpose are still in place. So my point is, I'm not even sure, even if we approve this, what the financial implications are anyway, because I'm not even sure what events are even going to be allowed to take place. But that's my take on it anyway. So what's the pleasure of the committee at this stage?
Chairman Conover, this is Bramer.
Supervisor Bramer, go right ahead.
Can we have a further discussion on what Supervisor Merlino said about they're only Americade? Americade is the only event that uses that parking lot or pays us? Is that what you said?
I couldn't
I
hear.
haven't heard much of what she said.
Supervisor Bramer, we're not, you're not coming through for some reason.
Speak closer.
Can you see me now? Okay.
I see.
My question was to Supervisor Merlino about the other events that are using the parking lot. I thought I heard him say that Americade is the only one.
Right.
And he said that's correct. But I agreed with Supervisor Sieber that if we're going to do this for one, we should do it for all. But I don't know if it really doesn't have that much of an impact because we only have one event. Although I know that the wine festival has pushed their date out to September. I didn't know they were looking to use this parking.
Gene, do you want to comment on any
Well,
of this?
that was my comment because I did talk to Sasha about a week ago, and she was interested in maybe using that Westwood parking lot. But I told her it had to come back to the board, and I think we should have it separate. I know Mary might not agree with it, or I will pay whatever she says. But over the years, Americade is the only one that's ever used Westwood parking lot, and they paid us for it. Unless I'm mistaken, maybe somebody else in between might have.
Sure.
To reduce that would be tough.
Kevin Hayjosh?
I think Kevin, yeah.
There has been a couple other events that have used that. The tow truck event that comes every year, they use the parking lot. They use it just before Americade. There's been a few other events here over the years that have used the parking lot. But the biggest user of it is Americade.
Yeah, Kevin, if you could just amplify one more time on the what you said about that you have to do it across the board for all the parking, just so everyone fully understands.
Yeah, Mary's on, I see she's in the video on the phone right now, but I'm going to have her touch base with this. But she said that if we can't do this as just to one event, it has to be done for everybody who would use that parking lot. If you do it for one, then she can explain it. It's like a gift under municipal law, and that's not allowed. So if we do it for one, similar to what we did for Charles R. Wood Park, we did it for everybody. If anybody else would want to use the parking lot this year, we'd have to give it to them for half price as well.
All right, I think that explains it pretty well. Mr. Stroud.
Yes, I'm thinking, and I'm on the OCTAX committee, and I'm thinking that one of the other reasons that we thought about reducing the parking fees was because this summer is a summer of high risk for any event that wants to venture into the Lake George area and bring some economy to the Lake George area, and that maybe we could help these events by reducing some of their costs. Some of these events, they have paid out and may never even happen, may never be successful. We thought that this year, and this year only, we would try and offer a reduction in costs for some of these events, hoping to encourage them and hoping to make them a little bit more successful financially, knowing that there's a high risk this year with all of them.
All right, I think at this stage, I think that I should ask, are there any two supervisors willing to make a motion regarding this item, and then we'll continue the discussion. Mr. Bruno, did I see your hand?
Yes, Mr.
The
Chairman.
motion to bring this forward. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Mr. Stroud on the second. Now further discussion. Mr. Leggett? You need to unmute. Mr. Leggett?
There we go. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So to get this right, and I'm looking at the map here of Westbrook parking lot. So it's the whole 2 lanes and the side angled parking. That gets rented out for a set fee. Is that correct?
Mr. Hajos?
That is correct. The parking lot gets rented out for events. Americade basically uses that whole parking lot. I believe the fee right now is $2,000 a day. And they get the entire use of the parking lot. During the rest of the time when there is no event out there, then the parking meters are set up and there's not a reduced fee to the parking meters. The parking meters are people coming to park. They would pay the meters as they normally would.
And that revenue from a normal busy day would be about what? How much?
I don't have an exact number. I could come up with one, but we've averaged probably anywhere from 500 to 1,000 a day. And that's just normal under the parking meters. But the village collects that money for us. We have an agreement with them to collect the money, and they keep a certain percentage. But I will get the numbers today, and I will email them to everyone.
Okay. Thank you.
Just to keep everyone aware of that, is we have not had the Westbrook parking lot open at all. We've had it closed along with, because the Charles R. Wood Park is closed at this time. So the meters aren't even out and in place yet at this time.
Supervisor Bruno?
Yeah, I just wanted to agree with, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to agree with Supervisor Strauss' comments, and this reduction in the fee may actually be more attractive to other events and stuff that in the past possibly didn't utilize that because of the cost. So it may be helpful.
Is everyone, are we ready for the question then? All those in favor of the motion to approve this signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? There being none opposed, the motion carries. Thank you all. Kevin, what else do we have? Kevin Hajos, what else do we have?
Nothing further on this agenda. We're going to move into Parks and Rec.
Okay. Go right ahead.
All right, so the first thing on page 2 of the Parks and Recreation agenda is the enter into a license agreement with Stewart's to connect to the bike path. As most of you are aware, they originally had come to us with 2 connections. We had looked at both those connections and decided that the one in the rear was not an ideal location for them to have a connection to the bike path. We told them to go back to the drawing board and submit the plans. You all should have a copy in your agenda of showing where the bike path is going to connect. You'll see that that's close to the intersection of Sanford Street and Ridge Street. It's very well lit in that area, and it provides a much better path, I guess I want to say, to Stewart's. And just to keep in mind that we charge a fee for anyone who uses any of our right-of-way. As most of you know, similar like Cooper's Cave has their deck there. They enter into a license agreement with us. And I believe this one, based on what Tim and I have looked at, based on square footage, this is $200 a year.
Ms. Bramer. Claudia?
Can you hear me?
Go ahead.
Ooh, that's too bad. Is there pavement, Kevin, from where the bike path entrance into the Stewart lot? Is there pavement over to the entrance?
Claudia, we're having a very difficult time understanding you. The reception is extremely poor.
Must be the chair, Ron.
Kevin, is there pavement from the entrance on that goes from the bike path to the Stewart's lot? Is there pavement then from there over to the entrance of Stewart's building itself?
if you take a look at the map that I provided, you'll see that it shows pavement, a connection basically to Stewart's lot from the bike path. It will be a paved, it's not paved right now, but it will be a paved pathway.
I know from the bike path over to their lot, this little bit inside the circle that you've drawn, but I'm asking you, is there pavement from there over to the front, over to where you could get inside Stewart's?
That's their paved parking lot, and that's a side, you're connecting into the concrete sidewalk, which leads right to their building. If you read the plans, it shows that you're connecting into the concrete sidewalk there. That's where the pavement from the bike path will connect into, which will lead them right up to the building.
Okay, I hear what you're saying. Just bear with me. So you're saying there is a sidewalk then that runs parallel to the bike path, but on Stewart's land over to the building?
Correct. They're
I
putting
can't
that.
see the words on the plan very well.
Oh, it's, if you see where it says asphalt path to the bike trail, that piece where it's coming up to is a 5-foot concrete sidewalk. They're actually going to put a bike rack on the entrance right there to their property, such that people can park their bikes there. But that sidewalk runs along the property line right up to their building.
Okay, and I see those two little circles then up by the corner of their building. That's all. Okay,
Supervisor Bruno. Oh, I'm sorry.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you,
Supervisor Bruno.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As chairman of the Glens Falls Planning Board, I'm intimately familiar with this project, and we looked at this very closely to ensure that people coming off the bike path would have good access to the store, if that's what they desired, without being in danger of being hit by a car or something pulling in for gas. So to answer Supervisor Bramer's question, yes, it would be paved from the bike path to the Stewart's parking lot, and then safe access around the parking lot to the store. So
Thank you for that information. That's excellent information. Any further consideration, Mr. Strauss?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, well, this is ideal. This is perfect. This is, as we develop a comprehensive alternative transportation system, this is what we want to see. We want to see interconnects for destination points where people who are riding their bicycles or walking or skateboarding, whatever multimodal form of transportation other than the automobile that they're using, and the interconnections should be encouraged. So this is absolutely the right thing to do. Thank you.
You're welcome. At this stage, I think we should bring this forward for further discussion. Mr. Beatty.
Yeah, thank you. Just a short comment. I walk that trail probably 6 days a week, that bike path, and I've checked out that location, and I concur it is an absolute perfect spot for the connection to the bike trail, far enough away from the Stewart's actual store, but gives a very safe and complete access to the bike trail. So great. I don't know who picked that spot, whether it was Stewart's or you, Mr. Hajos. Mr. Hajos did well. Kudos. That's a perfect spot. Thank you.
All right. Chair will entertain a motion to bring this forward for approval or further discussion and approval. Is that Ms. Bramer on the motion? Ms. Bramer on the motion. Is there a second? Andrea Hogan, Supervisor Hogan on the second. Further discussion on the request. There being none, are we ready for the question? All those in favor of approving the license agreement signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. Thank you, everyone. The next item is extension of contract with Adirondack Safari, aka glamping, rationale suspension of this year due to COVID-19. I think there should be, Kevin should give us a report on this before we entertain any motion. Kevin, what do we have here?
So I received an email about a week ago, or maybe a little over a week ago, from Mark Mateo, who is the owner of the glamping, Adirondack Safari glamping at the campgrounds, or I'm sorry, at the fairgrounds. I'm going to read the email real quick. It says, due to the COVID-19 crisis, we are finding that our reservations are down 90% for year to date for the 2020 season with good reason. Reservation deposits are used to fund opening expenses for this business. Governor Cuomo, as of this writing, still has not approved camping as essential. We have understandable concerns about the health and safety of our employees and guests, even if tent camping were to be approved in the future due to public restrooms, group events, camp, etc. Additionally, we would have to shell out $75,000 of fixed expenses to start our operation. He goes on to say that it seems that the hurdles of operating the season are overwhelming financially, in addition to the health risks to our guests and staff and the community. We also fear missing a season may have an impact on our future business. So what they are requesting, they had a 5-year contract with us, which was supposed to end in 2021. Since they are foregoing this year, he would like to extend that contract into 2022 so that they would have basically next year and the following year with us.
Does everyone understand the request? The request is to forego the rent for this year and extend the contract for 1 year. Mary?
Yeah, I'm actually looking at the contract right now, and they go through 2022.
I can't hear.
Yes, 200.
She's saying the contract she has in front of her goes through 2022, Kevin.
Yeah, Tim and I only had it as 2021. So I guess if it's 2022, then he doesn't have an issue, and we can do it through 2022. I thought, and we looked at it, that the contract started in 17 or, yeah, 17 was the first year, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. Was it to renew in 22, Mary?
No, they actually are supposed to pay us $218 per day in 2022.
Okay.
You're saying, Kevin, that they started in what year?
17. I thought 17 was the first year that contract was done. We amended it originally, and they started in 17. So that would have been 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. But if Mary says it's going through 22, then they are on for 22. And I guess we don't have to do an extension at this time.
That being the case, there's still half the question, which is the, Mary, what does the, if you don't mind, just for information purposes for the committee, what does the contract say relative to a request like this to forego the rent for a year?
The contract is actually, and it says for days of occupancy. So if they are not occupying the property, they don't have to pay us.
So no action by the board is required? If, in other words, the request to forego the rent, we should refer them to the contract. I mean, what are you saying here? That there's no guarantee on income other than occupancy. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So if they're not using the space, the contract doesn't require them to pay us. So as long as they don't move into that space and take it up, then they don't have to pay us.
Interesting. I'm not sure there's a motion here, but I'm going to allow discussion. Mr. Beatty, did I see your hand? No? Anyone else? Ms. Hogan? Supervisor Hogan?
Thank you, Chairman. Just to be clear, so in that contract, if they could reserve the space, we would forego letting anybody else use that space. But if they chose to come in late, leave early, pack up, that's really how that contract reads?
I mean, I'm just looking at it now. I haven't looked through the whole thing, but I'm looking at the terms and fees. And it says the occupancy fee shall be payable in 2 equal installments, 1/2 due on the first day of occupancy and 1/2 due at the midpoint of occupancy.
You understand Ms. Hogan's concern/question, which is that, so are you saying that there's a contract that exists that doesn't require them to pay us through 2022 if they don't occupy the space, but that they reserve the space through 2022? Did I see right from Andrea there? Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess that's the question. I don't know that we need to occupy much more of the committee meeting on this. What I'd recommend, Kevin Hajos?
And I'm not a lawyer, that's Mary, but can we say that with the email he sent me and says he wants to suspend this season, that means he's not using it this season? And the other question I have is, Mary, if that is the case, then if Tim happens to get a call from somebody else to use that space, they can use that space, correct?
Yeah, I think that we should put it in writing. I mean, we should probably have an agreement signed by both people that says he's not going to use the space this year. So that way you guys can rent it out to somebody else.
Mr. McGowan.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's how I'm kind of reading it. I think that's a good recommendation. It sounds like he doesn't want to use it, wants to extend his contract, which I don't have a problem with. But if he's not going to use it, we got to make sure he's not going to use it, and we have an option. Or if for something things open up and he can use it, then he could jump back in. That's just got to clarify that.
Kevin Hajos.
Yeah, just real quick, the reason I jumped to that is somebody else using it, and I was going to jump to this further down in my agenda here is Ed Zibro from the Warrensburg Bike Rally has reached out to me. He knows that he's not going to get in there at the end of May now, basically to use it for his Warrensburg Bike Rally, which happens the same time that Americade does. So he is asking to use the fairgrounds during the same time that Americade is down in Lake George. If that happens, he would like to use the fairgrounds during that time.
Yeah, before we move on to that, I think though, Mary, I think normally an agreement is a quid pro quo. It's an exchange of something for something. When I voted on this, I voted on this because there was a rental income and they could occupy the space and we would receive that income. Now there's no income, but it's not a breaking of the arrangement. It's not a violation of the arrangement. And so I have a real problem with that. I don't know. I'll open it up to the committee because I don't understand. So somebody can encumber our space through 2022 and they don't have to pay us a nickel unless they want to. I mean, why would we enter into such an arrangement? Why would anyone enter into such an arrangement? I guess that Kevin and you need to get together and we need to look at this and maybe go through the record, go through the discussion that took place at that time, and maybe come back to the committee. I think this matter should be set aside until we have more information. What's the pleasure of the committee in this regard? Mr. McGowan?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I mean, what you just said, did I read it wrong? They want to have the space available to them, but they don't want to pay for it just in case?
I mean, some might call that an interpretation, but I don't. I think that's the issue. As far as I'm concerned, that's the issue.
Well, I think we need to establish that, you know, no pay, no reservey.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to move this much further at this committee meeting. I think we need to have this looked at much more closely by our attorney and by the involved department as to exactly what the question is. I mean, it sounds to me like they don't even have to make the request. So if that's the case, then that brings up a whole host of other issues, I do believe. So I think we should just let it lie right now. That would be my recommendation. Mr. Wild?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Just briefly, I think we need to have a little compassion for some of the businesses that are struggling during this pandemic. But also to the point, we do need to make sure that if he's not going to come back next year or the year after, we need to have some time frame for us to be able to consider someone else who might want to take advantage of that space. Thank you.
I think that goes right to the point of all of this. All right, I think we should move on unless somebody's
Mr.
prepared
Chairman?
to entertain some type of motion. Mr. Leggett?
So where do we go with this? We have a vendor that's looking for some type of assurance that they will not be held liable for this year's activities. Does this go off to another committee or?
No, I think
come back to
it's
us
got
next
to,
month?
I think when Kevin Hajos and Mary sorted out with glam camping, I think they need to come back to committee because I'm not completely sure where we are
Okay.
relative to all of this at this moment. And that's an issue as far as I'm concerned. Mr. Hajos?
Just a quick suggestion. Can Mary and I can talk about this, but I think Mary kind of hit the nail on the head is if we have a contract with him to 2022, then right now, nothing with the contract really has to change except for the fact that he wants to suspend this year. The way that Mary's, I think it reads in the contract, although she has to look at it a little bit more, is that if there's no occupancy, he doesn't pay us. If that's the case, then as Mary said, maybe we just get something in writing that he has no access to that whatsoever for this year. And then we can talk about, the following years, what it would be. I think we raised it 5%. I think it was a 5% increase per year, plus the security deposit. So, but I think that's the best route to take right now is let Mary and I kind of look at, he said he wants to suspend for this year. So if it's suspended, we don't really have to change anything for his contract for this year because if it goes through 2022, that's what his contract is going to be. We're just concerned about whether or not he should be paying this year. If it's based on occupancy, then he shouldn't be, but then he's not going to have any access to that facility. And if there's somebody else who may want to use it this year, then they should be able to use it.
I understand all of that, but I'm not sure that option exists. So, I mean, I just want to facilitate the meeting here. I don't want to participate too deeply in the discussion, but just to help guide this along. What I don't like about that is why am I making a request of a leasee on property that we own? I mean, that's an issue. Mary?
I'm sorry. I think
Mary?
I might be confused because I am confused. I feel like this is getting more complicated. I think what Kevin's asking you to do is propose a resolution that allows him not to pay this summer, which would be what we need to change the contract. Is that correct? And if you don't want to change the contract, then we don't. I mean, I think that's the decision that has to be made. Maybe I'm confused. Maybe I'm confused.
I'm not hearing a lot out of the committee, so I think there's a group of us. Ryan?
Why don't we just encumber the funding for this contract in a deficit reduction program? It removes the.
Not coming through.
Can't hear you.
You're not coming through, Ryan, for some reason. Yeah, I really don't want to spend much more time on this. I think that I would ask for a motion just to set this aside for the time being until we can figure this. And Ms. Hogan, is that on the motion? Mr. Stroh on the second. All those in favor of setting this aside signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? All right, this is set aside. Kevin, what else do we have?
Next time on there, I think is under referral and pending items. I think this was for Ryan to contact Revolution Rail and the contractor selected for the washout repairs to determine when they were going to start work. I have already reached out, I think, and I'll let Mary and Ryan jump on it, but I believe the Revolution Rail contract is hopefully now signed. We have the contractor for the washout repairs coming this week. Actually, he's coming today. Tim's right here next to me. Keeping distance, of course. He's coming today to go through, look at the repairs, and then they wanted to start by June 14th to get the repairs started and wrapped up. We're going to find out today how long he thinks it'll take to get done. With these guys and the equipment they have, I don't think it'll take long, a couple weeks. I mean, I think we had 21 days for them to finish, but I think within a couple weeks they'll have it wrapped up.
Okay.
All right. Did we receive some type of request from Revolution Rail? Kevin, do you want to get into that or no?
I think, well, I want to say Mary can talk to that with the contract. I think they were looking for something possibly like with maybe a reduced fee or depending on the time that they're out there.
Yeah, we had asked, I think we had invited them to the meeting. Are they on the call by any chance?
We did. I believe Rob Hart, I saw his name on there. Yeah, he's there.
Rob, are you on the call?
Hi. We were muted, I guess, in our video. I don't know if you can see us.
Okay, Rob, is that you, Rob?
Yeah.
Okay. Are you here to make a request of the county?
Yeah, we wanted to give a quick update too. Mike's here with me as well. So our plan is to still run the north section that we've run over the past few years. We had a decent sized washout as well up there, Kevin, just to give some context, and that's been filled. And so we're ready to go as soon as we get the green light on that now. The going south out of North Creek towards Riparius, we still are interested in doing it, so we appreciate you getting on that repair. The Stony Creek section of the track, and why we're here, is we're requesting that be taken off the lease for this year, because we don't know what's going on with Thousand Acres Ranch, new management going on and things like that. They don't know what their status is. So our plan was to base out of there, but since we're not going to be able to do that this year, we're asking that we can take that piece off the lease for this year and hopefully get a reduction in rent.
All right. Discussion. The request is to exclude or delete the Stony Creek leg of this and to entertain a discussion of some. The rent is how much, Ryan? How much is the rent?
It was Ron, it's Mike here. It was $30,000 for 2020.
Okay, $30,000 was the rent. Is another Rob, is another complicating factor that you don't know when you're going to be allowed to operate? Do you have a sense of when?
Absolutely. Yeah, it is. We have a second thought about that, but I mean, we're trying to figure out where we fit into this phase, because there's one argument that we're in recreation, obviously, but then there's another argument that like tennis and golf are allowed to be open right now, and those are in 2s and 4s,
and the beaches.
And beaches are open and things like that. And so we've only go out in 2 and 4, and we've always been socially distancing. And so is there a way that we can kind of be seen under that umbrella is the second part. So, which we don't know where that is, and we're trying to figure that out.
Have you asked that question of Empire State?
Andrea has been advocating to try to help us with that. But we do plan to try to reach out. We've been trying to get something, but it's just hard for us to get through it.
Wow. It's,
Mr. Chairman?
I can't see, Mr. Leggett?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is there a particular amount of reduction in the lease to accommodate for the unuse of the Stony Creek line?
So we saw when we were trying to figure out how much of this lease we were going to be, how much of the payment we were going to be using for Stony Creek, it looked like about 1/3 to 1/2 of our income was going to be generated from that part. So we're fine if we could get 1/3 of a reduction. So if we could get it down to 20,000 for this year, that'd be great.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, for the sake of the meeting here, to get this onto the floor, make a motion that we amend the agreement with Revolution Rail to eliminate the lease portion of Stony Creek and reduce the lease amount by 1/3.
I'll second
that. We've heard the motion. Brett McGowan on the second. Any further discussion on the request? Supervisor Wild?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Just one question for Kevin. Have we invested any money in the Stony Creek line this year?
You're muted, Kevin.
Mute.
No, we have not invested anything in the Stony Creek section of line this year.
Thank you.
There being no other hands that I see, are we ready for the Supervisor Sieber?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just had a quick question. I know that when we initially talked about the negotiations of this type of contract and how much, we talked about a user, looking at what the use is. And I know Revolution Rail just gave us an idea of maybe it's about a third, but has any type of documentation or statistics been provided to the county board before we determine that total amount of a reduction?
Well, we were going to split what we can speak to is how we were going to split up the number of bikes. This is where I'm coming from with it, with the number. We have a fleet of 16 bikes we were going to operate out of North Creek to Repairs. We had 16 bikes we were going to operate out of Stony Creek. So we were saying half, a third to a half, and so we just thought the third would be us eating a little bit more than maybe what the revenue was going to be to make it easier. So the only way we were basing that revenue was off of the number of bikes.
Are you proposing, if I could, are you proposing $20,000 regardless of when you commence or how you commence your activity? You're commencing that as a payment to the county for the opportunity, should you be allowed to proceed? Is that what I'm hearing?
No, because it's already been in the lease that we would be prorated based off of when we're able to start. So the total was going to be $30,000 when we were supposed to start running. In the lease and everything we've worked out already with Ryan and Mary was that it's going to be prorated until we're able to start.
So you're saying you want it prorated on 20, not on 30?
Correct.
All right, I just want to make sure everyone understands that. Does that bring a little more clarity to Supervisor Sieber?
I'm sorry, Chairman Conover. I'm really, I guess, looking for a weigh-in from our county attorney's office on this. I certainly have more questions. I don't need them answered today, but perhaps Mary could shed some light.
Sure, Mary?
Yeah, I actually don't agree with that statement that it's prorated. The only time we're prorating in the lease is if they were to stop operating because of a bankruptcy or something like that. We did not prorate the 30,000 other than that. So
Mary, this is Mike. It was my understanding that in the last draft, you put in something that was a proration that would apply if for legal or regulatory reasons, we're unable to operate the business.
no, I can't do that without board authority. I can't change what you're paying us.
Okay. Well, I could go back and look at the document and figure out how I misunderstood it. But we are also looking, to be clear, we're looking for a proration if the state of New York doesn't allow us to open our business. We would like the rents to be prorated accordingly.
You would need a board authority for that. So
Yeah, I'm trying to be super clear that we've got the group here right now, and hopefully you all can make a decision on that.
Yeah, those that made the motion, do you understand the secondary question that could be added to your motion, which would not only to be reduce the lease from 30 to 20, but to also ensure that that's prorated against the term of their activity, which could be to zero. Mr. McGowan?
Yeah, I have a question on that because it just, and no offense to you guys, I mean, just understanding, these are the gambles. You're not the only one in this boat with this pandemic going on here, and what you're asking it for the county. I mean, there's grants and there was, SB business loans out there. There was ways to get money to get your business, to cover these expenses. And I'm not trying to nickel dime you. I really am 100% behind what you're doing, and I think it's a wonderful thing. And I'm sorry Stony Creek fell apart for you, because I really think that would have been for great, and hopefully in the future that can come. But I think what you're asking is kind of really unfair in the sense that, the state and the federal government have plans intact to help small businesses like you on this.
Andrea, did I see your hand? Yes. Andrea Hogan, Supervisor Hogan.
Thank you, Chairman Conover. I sincerely hope that Supervisor Leggett will amend his motion, but also to Supervisor McGowan's point, I'm just going to point out that we gave Americaid $40,000 without a guarantee, and said, but if you can't do it, that's okay. We're not going to look for that money back. But now in the converse, you're asking these guys to pay us for something that we might not be able to allow. I'm having trouble with the lack of continuity here.
Supervisor Wild.
Mr. Chairman, again, I'm going to repeat this. There's a lot of businesses that are struggling. This is a difference between 20,000 and 30,000. We need to support our local businesses to get this recovery moving forward. I don't see why this is a big deal. My suggestion would be to limit it for the 2020 season. And then as we go forward to the following seasons, then it goes back to the normal without proration.
Those that made the motion, Mr. Leggett, you made the original motion. Are you interested in amending it or withdrawing it?
I would be interested in amending it if I get this clear. We are also looking to amend it then to allow for proration on moving the opening date to a different time. We have a full season schedule of X number of days, and the prorated would be based on that number of days. Is that correct?
That's correct. It could go from $20,000 to zero.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, they're not allowed to operate.
Yeah.
I might add that when we delete, let's just when we delete Stony Creek and go from 30 to 20, we've already started the operating year, so the 20 is already being prorated down. Is that correct?
Yes.
So just to be clear, the 20 has already been prorated down by how much?
Not that much. Ron, this is Mike. Not that much right now because this early in the year we will only be running like Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Right.
So we missed Mother's Day, 9th and 10th. We missed this last weekend, which was 2 more days, and then we'll miss the 4 of Memorial Day weekend. So that's 8 days total out of 180, somewhere around that, over the course of the whole year.
Right.
Yeah.
And right now you're being grouped in phase 4. Is that correct on the pause order?
I think everybody's assuming because we're recreation. No, I mean nobody knows where rail biking fits in lots of kind of contexts, but we're all just assuming. We know we're not construction, right? So we know we're not open right now, but where we fit in the following phases, we're trying to figure that out and make it earlier because we think it's a safer activity.
All right, we've had a motion to allow the staff to execute an amendment which reduces the payment from $30,000 to $20,000, and the motion has been amended to allow for a proration on the $20,000 based on the operating year. Mr. McGowan, were you the second on the original motion?
I believe
Amanda was Brad McGowan? He was. Mr. McGowan, are you prepared to amend your second to allow for the proration? All right, we've got the motion amended. Does everyone understand the motion?
Yes.
Further discussion?
And
Mr. Leggett?
thank you, Mr. Chairman, for summarizing that so well. That this is in line with this committee's and the other supervisors' efforts to help out businesses. We have a long-time partnership with Revolution Rail on these lines. These are lines that are added this year that we would not have had any income derived anyway. So we appreciate their efforts on taking the risk of building a business that utilizes more of the county's resources, and we're building a long-term relationship here. Thank you for your support on this.
Okay, I think that it's been made abundantly clear. Are we ready for the motion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None opposed. Motion is carried. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Bob. Thank you for appearing today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Rachel.
Commissioner Hajos, I'm promoting you again, Commissioner. What, anything else?
You're muted, Kevin.
We're next on to information for discussion and review, but I believe Supervisor Seaver might have had a question.
Oh, I'm sorry, Rachel. I didn't see you. Did you? Go ahead, Rachel. What was your question?
Thank you, Supervisor Conover. I'm sure it wasn't intentional.
No, of course not.
It. Hey, I just wanted to say before Revolution and Rail got off that, and I don't know, maybe they're still here, but he indicated that, let's go ahead and let's do this right now. Everybody's here. But it's my understanding this is still something that needs to go to the full board. Am I incorrect?
I'll leave that for Mary. Mary, is this a resolution that's going to have to go to the board?
Yes.
This is going to have to go to the board.
Okay, so I just want to be clear. This isn't, I still have several questions. I know I definitely want to ask our county attorney and county admin about it. And while, I will fully disclose, I haven't been up and I haven't tried it. I've talked to a lot of people in Johnsburg that love it. I understand it's a great resource for our community, but we aren't paying for this out of OCTAX. This is a county contract. And furthermore, it's something that we need to be careful if we're going to start modifying a lot of these, that we keep open minds and we do this for other businesses that are struggling. But I agree with Supervisor McGowan's comments, and I do think there's more conversation that needs to take place about it, recognizing I'm not on your committee, but that I will have questions come the full board. Hopefully I get them answered at a time.
Yeah, and I would ask that you, just to help Frank Thomas in the board meeting, that any questions you have with the county attorney or Commissioner Hajos, if you could do them in advance of the meeting, and then you could conclude where you are at the board meeting, with the questions, or if you could even provide them to the Mary in writing, or to Kevin Hajos, that would be helpful as well. But I understand exactly what you're saying. It's a difficult year. It's a difficult issue. You're right as rain. So. Anyone else? Kevin, anything else?
Well, we're under information for discussion. We're under information for discussion and review right now. The first thing on that list, I know it was talked about in the board meeting. I believe both Claudia and Matt spoke about it. I'll just give you kind of a heads up. The Salvation Army of Glens Falls is doing a drive-through food pantry on this Friday, May 22nd, from 11 a.m. and basically what they say till supplies last. I've talked with, I guess they call him Sergeant Leo of the Salvation Army. He has indicated that they're expecting probably 300 to 400 people. The one thing he did say is that at the end of this, there may be food left over, and I talked to Supervisor Garrity yesterday, but if there are any food pantries in the area, there's no guarantee, but if there's food pantries in the area that might come at the very end, if there's any food left over, they are all more than welcome to come. The event's first come, first serve. All volunteers have to follow CDC guidelines when wearing masks, gloves, and participating as much as they can in the social distancing. And I believe Matt was going to ask, but I guess I would put out the request to anybody want to volunteer. I believe the volunteers need to be there at 9 a.m.
Everyone hear that? Volunteers 9 a.m. And to Kevin, please extend our gratitude, the board's gratitude, the committee's gratitude to the Salvation Army, and certainly to you and Kevin Garrity and Matt Simpson for making this happen.
I will.
Anything else, Kevin?
Next on the list, I'm going to turn it over to Tim Benway, who will let me turn my table here so we get our distancing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next, I have a request for a railroad easement on the Van Gilder property in Lake Luzerne. And we've been dealing with this property now for at least a decade. Years ago, it was an old plank road for the town. It was converted over to where it presently is now. That was abandoned. Our railroad goes through there. There is apparently no legal easement to this landlocked property. So this gentleman we have with us today, Mr. Chandler Atkins, is requesting an easement because he would like to purchase this property for an ATV trail system. In the past, we have had numerous inquiries on this piece of property, and it's always came back that if it's not a legal crossing, the county will not enter or even entertain a new crossing across the railroad. That's all I have.
All right. Just for the board's information, if you could recite how the map and Kevin or Mr. Benway, how crossings are established across the railroad.
Yeah, most of the crossings that are on this railroad, I don't think since we've owned the railroad, and Tim can correct me if I'm wrong, that we have ever given anybody a crossing on the railroad. We have relied on the valuation maps that were produced by the railroad well before the county ever took it over. We took a look at that val map in this area. There was never a legitimate crossing by the railroad. And again, as Tim said, this had come up in the past on the same piece of property. I mean, I can tell you right now, along our railroad, we have landlocked property. You could probably name 100 different landlocked properties along our railroad. And every once in a while, these have come up that somebody wants a crossing to one of these properties, but it has never been granted in the past. I know that Mr. Atkins is on the phone with us. You know, if you want to allow him to speak, by all means. But again, we have never changed. We've never changed the crossings as what was originally established on valuation maps, and those were from anywhere from 1895 through the early 1900s. And I know that there's a couple crossings that Iowa Pacific helped people with, and not necessarily gave them new crossings, just helped them establish, or install crossings or a better crossing at ones that were already there. But we have never given any crossings on that railroad in all the time we've ever owned it.
All right. Just so everyone understand what a val map is. Is everyone clear on what that is? That's the map that identifies when they established the railroad, where the crossings would be. All right. Mr. Chandler, how are you? Thank you for joining us today. If you could discuss briefly what your request is and what your need is.
Yes, thank you, supervisors and Superintendent Hayos, for allowing me to come this morning. I own the Elms Waterfront Cottages in Lake Luzerne. I've owned it for 25 years. And we're, a good seasonal business providing cottages for, the folks. Across from my property is this piece of land, approximately 122 acres. And it would be ideal for me to open up an additional business there, whether it would be ATVs, which I've thought about, or whether it would be perhaps a glamping kind of idea. I'm thinking about the revenues that it would generate for the county in sales tax. I'm thinking about the jobs it would create, and I'm thinking about the tourist guest attraction that it would bring to our area. So I'm all about the tourism in the area. I understand that it's landlocked, so I'm not going to go forward to purchase the property with it being landlocked by the railroad track, because I would need to get over the railroad track to get into the property to develop it. I don't know what the intent of the county is with regards to operating that railroad in the future, or ripping up the tracks, or what they intend to do. But it seems as though there's going to be some changes in that usage of the railroad in the future. And I think that it would be a good idea to, in my mind, to proceed with some kind of a development there that would help the overall tourism of the area, and bring some better benefit to the community than what's just existing there right now. So I'm proposing this. I see that it hasn't been done before. I don't know the legalities, so I leave it in your hands.
Welcome to the
Okay, well, thank you for that presentation. Supervisor Hogan.
Thank you, Chairman. I just have a question for Mary. with the trustee for the Sanford branch actively seeking operators for freight, is this something we can even contemplate at this point in time?
I'm assuming that this right away would be on the county property, not the property owned by Ellis. I'm not sure about that. But if it's on county owned property, that's not something that the trustee would have to be involved in at this point.
Right, but is the STB gonna step in and say you can't have a driveway for a public access or, you know, a business like that on a freight line? I would be afraid that we would say, yes, we love this idea, only to have a year from now, after he's put investment into this, some entity that we don't have any control over yanking it out from underneath him.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question. That's certainly something we could reach out to the STB and ask them, but I don't know.
Supervisor Leggett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Where is this property located?
In Hadley.
Town of Luzerne, I believe.
Yeah. We don't have a railroad in Luzerne itself, do we?
Yes.
Oh,
It runs through Luzerne to Hadley.
Luzerne to Hadley.
I would suggest that we have a map and more information.
Mr. McGowan.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chandler Atkins, thank you very much. You presented a plan that really, I would love to jump on it, you know, really to help out your area and for tourism. Really, my only concern is with the railroad being really not sure what we're going to be doing with it, because we haven't. I'd hate to see you make any investment and then we have to turn around and take it back, or say, geez, I'm sorry. So that wouldn't be fair to you. Until we have more of a square answer, I would like to see you hang on to that plan, because I think it's a wonderful plan.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, Gene?
All right, we have some comments in the boardroom.
Yep. Gene Marino would like to speak. Can you hear me?
Yes, go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, some of these reasons everybody's given, there's hundreds of crossways along that track. And there's hundreds of private crossways along that track. So you can't tell me that if another freight train comes through, they're going to take away all those private accesses. This is an opportunity that some land has been trying to be sold for years, but the only access that can go is through over those tracks. And I can't see why not we give this gentleman the access to that property to make it grow for tourism, bring people in, get tax money, employment. I mean, it's just an access over the railroad tracks. Even if we have to put signals there, he'll pay for the signals. It'll be like any other crossing. I don't understand all this back and forth. And the tracks are not in Lake Luzerne. The county owns the tracks. It's in the town of Hadley, right along the border. So,
Sir,
so everybody knows where it is. Thank you.
Supervisor Hogan, Andrea Hogan.
thank you. Just to clarify, I'm not opposed to this at all. I just would hate to see something happen where we said, yes, this is a great idea, go ahead, and then the STB says, no, there's a grandfather clause. I think what I'd like to see is some clarity on what we're allowed to do in this moment of uncertainty before you go ahead, Mr. Atkins, and invest in your idea. I'm not opposed to it.
I appreciate that, Supervisor. I think one of the things that I knew in the back of my mind after talking with Kevin is that there was a lot of uncertainty with where the board stood on this whole railroad situation. But maybe if I came forward and you really saw a face with an idea, that maybe it would push the county forward a little bit in their thinking about where we need to go in the future. So I wouldn't be totally disappointed by you saying to me right now, it's a great plan, but we're not ready for it, if that helps you in your thinking.
It helps this supervisor, I can tell you. you can understand that we could get requests for 100 driveways tomorrow. And what does that do to the corridor, and what any activity on the corridor? And that's before we even talk about the complexities of the STB or anything else. It's the establishment of private driveways through the corridor is, it seemed to me, that we would have to make, because if we do it for one, we're going to have to do it for 100 more.
Yeah.
I do believe. I mean, that's where I'm at with this, unless we set up some rational criteria. But Gene's saying it's not even our corridor, so I'm not even sure any action is even required on the part of the. I thought, why are we being asked for the easement if it's in if the property and the right of way is going to be in Hadley? Did I hear that correctly?
No.
No, I did not hear that correctly.
Kevin Hajos.
Kevin Hajos. Gene said that the property is in. Is it that the property is in Hadley, but the crossing would be our crossing?
The crossing is on our railroad, within our right of way, regardless of whether it's in Hadley or not. As you all know, we own the tracks down to Corinth. It's our crossing in that area. As far as Andrew's question goes, as far as the STB, I don't know that the STB would have any say in crossings because it's our right of way. We have a certain number of right of way across that, but I am more than willing to, right when this meeting's done today, reach out to the STB and ask them that question.
Thank you.
I think we have a major matter going forward, which deals with no matter what happens with the corridor going forward, there's interest from adjacent property owners that have at least landlocked pieces to have private driveways across this corridor. And so that's something that's going to have to be put into the mix at some point in time and considered by this board. And Mr. Chandler, we do appreciate you being here today.
Thank you very much for your time and appreciate your interest as well. Thank you.
Kevin, anything else, Kevin?
Yeah, I have the stocking report. We are finished as today. 27,532. I want to thank all of my staff and our fish manager, Jeff Ingley, and his new apprentice, Jacob Dunkley, is our new hatchery aide. They did a wonderful job. It was his first season as a new employee. Everything went well. Unfortunately, we don't have our derbies for children this year, but those fish did go in those waters. So it was a successful season, and we look forward to next year.
Thank you. Brad, did I see your hand?
Yes, I just, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Something just to think of, I believe Mr. Chandler's got a great project here, and maybe we want to look into, so it's not opening up every little single driveway, is that, it needs to have some form of traffic count or something like that, where it's not a private driveway where, going to a house, what you have to worry about, let's say it might limit it, make it like a business or something. Do you follow what I'm trying to say?
I do. And I think Kevin Hajos fully understands the challenge in front of us. I would ask that we be a little bit patient, have him come back to us with some of his thoughts. It's and how it would apply to other properties as well. That's a major decision to provide who knows how many crossings across the corridor going forward, especially when we don't know the full use of the corridor going forward, whether it's going to be rail or recreation or rev rail or whatever. That's a crossing is a crossing, right?
Chairman.
So,
Chairman, this is Bramer in the boardroom and Garrity. We both wanted to say something on that if you let us.
Sure.
I wanted to comment that we have, like Supervisor Hogan said, tons of railroad crossings. We have granted them recently even. So I'm not totally opposed. I would like to see a map of where it is. And also I would remind everybody that some of us wanted to try to sell that Bay Road property to someone that had an exciting idea to use it. And I was all for that. I'm excited to see what this guy has to offer. And we should be looking forward to supporting him in that idea, especially as it relates to non-freight railroad use of the railroad corridor. And Mr. Garrity wanted to say something.
Yeah, Kevin Garrity.
Yeah, I just want to go back to, because the glamping is up in the air, then I guess you can't authorize Bike Week to use the fairgrounds. Is that correct, Kevin?
Yeah, since we put glamping on hold, I would assume that for the Warrensburg Bike Rally, unless Mary can say something different, they're on hold to give them any authorization to use the facility either.
Okay, and then just on the crossings, I mean, we've gone through this before, and who authorized the crossing, the railroad or us?
Us.
Owner of the tracks or the railroad?
Owner of the tracks.
Owner of the track. So there's a procedure you have to follow, the distance and all that stuff factors into it, correct?
That is correct.
All right.
But again, I just want to jump back to Supervisor Bramer. We have not, and Tim's kind of shaking his head. Yes, we have not ever provided anybody access across the tracks. The access was already there. They were part of the valuation maps that we accepted when we took over the railroad track, and those are the crossings that we have. I know last year, someone may remember that I brought one to committee, but that was a legitimate crossing. It just didn't, apparently the mapping didn't show up for the realtor when they were trying to sell the property, but it was a legitimate crossing based on evaluation maps.
Right, and it's been there for a long time.
That's correct.
That's right. That was one overturned.
All right. Any other business, Kevin, to come before the committee?
The next one was going to be the discussion on the Warrensburg Bike Rally, but we put that on hold. The next thing I wanted to say is Parks and Rec and DPW are 100% back to work except for some admin staff. With that being said, Tim's doing some, and his staff are doing some cleanup on the bike path as well as the canoe and boat launches and some of the nature trails. Once they get that wrapped up, it is our goal to start getting a couple of his staff up to the Swede Mountain Fire Trail to try to start blazing that trail through there to hopefully get that to open maybe sometime this year. So we have plenty of volunteers that have come forward. I know that if Edna's still on the line, and Shock has reached out, the Shock Treatment has reached out to me as well, that they're willing to offer up individuals to work on the trail also. So that's a good thing. The other thing is just a kind of a little bit of good news that we need, I think, at this time. There was a letter received by the county or by the DPW discussing a field trip that the St. Clemens School had at the fish hatchery. And basically it says, we cannot thank you enough for the wonderful tour and all the information that was given to us. The students and parents loved the facility and your presentation to the kids. You are a natural, and that makes attending so much more fun and informative for everyone. Please pass along these sentiments to Jake as well. He will be a great addition to your staff. I think that you will see some of our families are up there on a regular basis, probably in the spring and summer. So many never knew about it. Isn't it amazing that some of the best kept secrets are right in our own backyard? Thank you for the compliment to our students, and we will most assuredly pass on to them. Hoping you see some of our families at Spring Zing, which of course didn't happen. Sounds like a great day. Sherry, our stream teacher, was thoroughly impressed and was so grateful to have you as a resource for the Trout in Classroom program. The program fit perfectly with the for what she hopes for her students to learn. Thank you once again for giving us an up-close and personal view of the most important piece of science in our world. We appreciate your time and effort and great energy. See you soon, and I'll work on our date for next year. That was from the St. Clemens School, and that was a letter written to the hatchery for the tour that Jeff Ingley had provided them. So just a bit of good news. And then Tim has one more that we received from Friends of Up Yonder.
Yeah, Friends of Up Yonder come to me and they wanted to do some benches for the summit for Up Yonder. And she said that she would supply the wood if my maintenance men would put together their pattern that they supplied. So they donated the wood from Curtis Lumber. We placed 2 benches that we made of their plans. So they are now sitting on top of the summit at Up Yonder overlooking the lake. And I just want to thank Friends of Up Yonder and let you guys know that they're doing a wonderful thing for us. Thank you.
Yeah, they're a great group. Frank, I think the pattern on those benches came out of those benches you used over there in Stony Creek.
It is.
It is, yeah. That was a really very attractive a bench on your trails there. And impressed some of the folks that are on the board at Up Yonder. All right, then. There being no further, do we have any call-in questions? Any discussion?
Chairman Conover, no, we do not have any public commentary or input as of now.
All right, thank you. Then the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn. Thank you, everyone, for being so patient. Chair will entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. McGowan, Andrea Hogan on the second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.